Good afternoon, Andy Chappell. Thank you very much for joining me on the podcast today. It's good to see you again.
Hey, Jake, thanks for having me, and it's great to see you again.
I'd love to start off the episode and talk a little bit about Derryfield and your new position and kind of what this new role at a new school has been like for you so far, and maybe some of the reasons why you chose to leave Roxbury Latin after a long time, an awesome school, to take on this new venture at Derryfield.
Yeah, those are everyone's questions, and they're good questions. They were my questions as well. I think I'll first start with Derryfield. So excited to have an opportunity to lead a school, and a school that I knew a little bit about. The backstory is that my wife went to school here, graduated in 1993, and so when I met her in 1997, that was the first time I had heard about Derryfield and her experience here, and she had had a great experience. It's a small world story in the sense that her father was actually the head of school here in the 80s and early 90s. And so there also was this historical knowledge of the school and of the people of the school. And as we know in schools, I'm sure Gilman's the same, Roxbury Latin is the same. There is just a strong group of people who, teachers, staff members who have been here for a long time, who really dedicated their lives to this institution and made it what it was. And so when I saw that the opportunity was available, it really, for our whole family, my wife and my daughter and my son and I, a no-brainer in terms of, wow, this is a great leadership opportunity. It's a school that we know. It's in New England, which is often difficult for someone who wants to seek a head's role to stay in New England. You often, you hear stories people having to leave typically. And so all of the stars aligned in that way. And the big question is, why after 25 years at Roxbury Latin would you leave? And it's a terrific question. Roxbury Latin is a place that really allowed me to grow up professionally and personally. Gave me lots of opportunities, starting with Tony Jarvis, who was the headmaster at the time, who hired me initially, and then when he retired, Kerry Brennan, who's been there for the past 19 years, really allowed me to blossom and grow and give me different opportunities to learn how schools work, how to lead schools, put me in the right places to have the right conversations. And so really feel fortunate to have a number of mentors who allowed me to grow, with the idea that one day I would hopefully get an opportunity to lead a school, and was really encouraged to do that. And so, why Derryfield? Family connections, knowledge of the school, New England, and why leave Roxbury Latin? Certainly didn't leave Roxbury Latin because I wanted necessarily to leave Roxbury Latin, but it was always in the past couple of years, the idea that, it's time, to spread my wings and have a chance to lead a school. And with Kerry Brennan's support and my family's support, here I am. So very happy to be here.
Love it. Love it. I actually read a little bit of Kerry Brennan's note when you were leaving. I think that's published online, and he had a lot of great things to say about you, and I learned a little bit more about what you were doing at Roxbury Latin over those 25 years there. One thing that stands out to me that I want to talk to you about today is that Roxbury Latin was founded in what, early 1645, and Derryfield in 1964. And I'm so curious about just going from a school with so much tradition and history to a fairly new school that's much different, and what that transition has been like for you.
Yeah, that is a terrific question. One of the things that I loved about Roxbury Latin is, even though it was founded in 1645 and had this deep sense of history, and in my background being a classicist and religious studies major in college and having taught Latin and Greek for a number of years, I loved being in a school where history and language was so important to that community. But the other thing that I loved about Roxbury Latin was a true desire to innovate, a true desire to get better. And we would often talk about, the idea that, school had been around a long time. It had really good systems and lots of great things going on. But, one of the things that Kerry Brennan and Tony Jarvis before him were often asking is, how can we do this better? How can we improve? How can we serve in that particular school, the boys, because it's an all boys school, how can we serve the boys and fulfill the mission of this school better than we do today? And so that was a question we always had on our minds. in a school where one could argue maybe you didn't really need to ask those questions because it was run so well and had such a great reputation. But I think that was the reason, that is the reason, right, why Roxbury Latin is revered so much by people, because that question is always asked. So, for me, looking at Derryfield, which is a much younger school by, a good 320 years, I actually saw the stars align in the sense that, Derryfield is a place that has its own really impressive young history of 60 years, just about. Lots of wonderful things that have happened, lots of great stories to tell from the founding of the school until today. And again, because of my family's connection to the school, knowing that 30, 40 years ago, imagining the conversations that were happening then about what the school would look like 30 or 40 years from today. And so when I come here, both because of my training at Roxbury Latin, where you were often thinking in decades and in centuries rather than in just the next year, and the impact that the school could have both on the students who are there and the faculty and staff, but also on the community. Bringing that vision to a younger school, and a school that tends to be, as most younger schools do, really thinking year to year, like, we need to be successful next year or maybe in 2 years, having that longer term, broader vision of around financial sustainability, creating really rich programming, which existed here, and yet also a hunger to continue to refine that and make it better, right? So the same mindset that I grew up with at Roxbury Latin, applying that here was really very easy, because it also very much existed here, that innovative entrepreneurial mindset. And so that piece for me it was such an easy shoe to put on. It fit really well. And felt good to me as I began to have conversations about, where was Derryfield? What were they thinking about? Is this a place that has a growth mindset, or are they kind of content with where they are? And there was very much no, we are so eager to get better, and doing that year to year, but also really thinking long term about what the future of the school looks like. So for me, all of that came together nicely.
So coming into the role of head of school, from Roxbury Latin, coming to Derryfield, I'm sure that that's so exciting that you have, new people to work with, a new vision to try to implement at the school, new colleagues, but also sort of daunting because it's all brand new, and you're used to what you're used to at Roxbury Latin, but now you have so many opportunities and a lot of agency as a school leader. What is kind of your vision for Derryfield in the near future and the long future? What do you want to do there?
Well, that's a question that lots of people would like the answer to, and I've been very careful in this first year to take my time with that. There's certain things that, from the beginning aligned in terms of the mission, vision, and values of the school, aligning with my own personal mission, vision, and values. So that stuff was easy. Core values around community and kindness and caring, and just so. For me, and our core value that we elevated this year was community. Coming out of the pandemic, a lot of things have been disrupted, which is true for all schools. Really wanting to think intentionally about how we build community here, what that looks like, how do we do it, how have we done it, how should we do it, and really thinking about that. And so throughout the year, at different very important moments, we've leaned into that. But for the most part, I've spent a lot of time thinking about and watching and observing and taking an input around, what has been done here, how it's been done, everything from the academic program to the, facilities. We're in the middle of building a new dining commons, a new facility. That's a good challenge and good opportunity that I walked into as the head of school here. And so, thinking about all of that and how it fits together with what this community wants to be and what it wants to become, because it has such a solid and wonderful foundation. The preceding head of school, Mary Halpin Carter, who's now at St. Luke's in New Canaan, Connecticut, over her 9 years here, really helped to elevate this school to new heights. And Derryfield owes so much to her and her leadership and the leadership team that still exists here. So for me, it's really taking that vision and molding and shaping it, a little bit to my personality, but also to everyone's personality and everyone's collaborative vision about what this school can become over time. And so there are two things for me, Jake, in helping me to develop that vision, which are really important. Number one, we're in the middle of an accreditation year. So we're doing a self-study as a school. A lot of the work for me of listening and observing is happening organically because of that process. And I'm sure Gilman has a similar process that they go through maybe every 5 or 10 years. So Derryfield's doing that this year. And we're also in the fourth of the fifth year of a strategic plan that had been established a number of years ago. And so the timing is right to really develop that vision collaboratively. And we're well on our way doing that, And, one of the great lessons I learned from a mentor of mine is not to be impatient. You don't need a vision in October or even in February, but you certainly do need one as you head into your second year and your third year and your fourth year. And I learn more, I collect more data points every day. I have great conversations with a wide variety of people to really think about how that vision will develop as we move forward.
Awesome. Yeah, I'd love to know also a little bit more about just what the school is like. I know it's co-ed. I know it's in Manchester, New Hampshire. You told me that there's some snow on the ground. I'm sure it's cold right now. But what is kind of the school life on the day-to-day? Like, what are some things that you see when you walk around campus? What is the structure of the school like? Just maybe a little bit more about Derryfield as a place would be helpful, just trying to imagine or visualize what it's like there.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. It is one of the things that really attracted me, even having known about it for a long time. But when I began to explore and then visited, and now that I've been here for 7 months, it is a truly joyful place. Kids, lots of smiles, lots of activity, lots of energy in classrooms, outside of classrooms, and a real desire to get involved with one another and to support one another. It's a place where, student leaning into student support, leaning into student leadership is really kind of paramount to how things happen here. So I had a meeting with some students in the summer right before I got here, and I asked the question, how have you learned about leadership, at Derryfield? It seems like you all are really talented student leaders, and I've met some other kids. How does that happen? And I thought they would talk about a program or a class or something that the school offered, because we do have some programming around that. But they all talked about how in each of their classes, on their teams, in the play, or whatever activity they're a part of, that adults really allow them to develop as leaders. They really ask them, demand that they be leaders, and then they also support them in that leadership. And so one of the things that's magical for me as I just walk around campus is you have students really taking the lead in lots of small and big ways, and doing it joyfully. I'll give an example. This week is what we call Winter Carnival, where we spend the whole week, the students organize it, and it's tip of the cap to the fact that it's cold, it's snow outside. We need a little joy at this time of year, and so the school is divided up into maroon and white, the school colors, and that's something that happens when you enter the school. I'm maroon, for instance, and we have lots of activities that happen throughout the week. Today we had dodgeball, so during our community meeting where we gather once a week, but this week we gather multiple times. There were just multiple competitions of dodgeball, just fun, lots of good music, people laughing, having a great time. And that really permeates, throughout the school, lunch, to classrooms, to, sports after school. So that vibe is I think really compelling. When people come to visit here, they pick up on it, they note it, and they really enjoy and appreciate it. But I would say that has a lot to do with the students taking the lead,
Mm-hmm.
which is really impressive, and I think unique and distinctive about this institution.
I like it a lot. Yeah, that just really reminds me of Gilman too, and the ways that we've tried to foster community, especially after the pandemic, because it was so hard during that time. That's really when we started this podcast, because I personally was missing having conversations with people and connecting with other people. But community building can be so simple as to do a pickleball night, or a dodgeball game, or have lunch with each other. And it's so important at a school that people have that chance to just talk to each other and get to know each other. And I like that aim, for especially as a new leader at a school, to focus on community.
Yeah. Well, it's it's something that was true at Roxbury Latin. I think it's true at Gilman. A strong sense of support of one another. A number of different rituals and traditions that are kind of part of the school. I noted here Winter Carnival. I'm sure you have similar rituals or different traditions at Gilman. Certainly were true at Roxbury Latin. And so for me, it's as someone noted to me recently, it's being intentional about building community. I think there are a number of leaders who just think it kind of happens organically, and it does. But you also, in my view, have to be very intentional about leaning into those rituals that exist in a school in order to build that community, in order to set the tone in terms of what you hope the school, will feel like and look like, and how people will interact with one another.
So something else that I think about when I think about you is mentorship, because we got to know each other through the Penn Fellowship program that you worked very closely with at Roxbury Latin, and we had here. That's why I got to Gilman, is I did that program a couple of years ago. But I'd love to hear a little bit about your own mentorship and the way that I know that you graduated from Virginia and went right to Roxbury Latin, and maybe some of the ways that you were mentored and learned about mentorship when you were a young teacher, young faculty member at Roxbury Latin.
That's a great question. I think this is an area, first of all, I was very fortunate to be mentored by a number of people, as you can imagine, when I got to Roxbury Latin. Most of them teachers, staff members, but even the head of school, the headmaster, Tony Jarvis. He really took me under his wing early on and was so helpful to me in so many different ways. Everything from let's sit down and talk about writing comments and advisor letters and kind of what the essence of that looks like, and helpful in that way. But also just so much wisdom about running a school and working with kids. And those who don't know Tony Jarvis, he was an Episcopal priest as well as a headmaster, and he wore these two hats, and he did them in a way that I always admired, that he could tend to a parish and also run a school. And he had support tending to a parish, and he also had support running a school. But it was my first glimpse at mentorship that had to do with being very pastoral, and recognizing that in leadership, so much of it is about supporting people, mentoring people, helping them to develop whatever skills they need to develop in that moment. And so at age 23, there were certain skills I needed versus what I needed when I was 30. And so he was critical, but there were other colleagues of mine in the classics department, Jack Brennan, Ned Ligon, two legendary teachers at Roxbury Latin who were there for a long time, who you reminded me that humor was so important to what I did each day with my work with students, but also work with colleagues, but also substance, and the substance of students recognizing that they won't respect you until they understand that you're a good teacher, and that you know what you're both talking about, but that you also have the skills you need to be successful in the classroom. And they really helped to develop that in me and to help me with that. The other part of my story is that I met my wife in the very first year I started at Roxbury Latin. She was there as well. And we had a mentorship of a different type, in the sense that we had a support group with each other, as we kind of worked our way through being young teachers and what all that looks like, and some of the really bright moments, and also some of the other moments that were a struggle. But I would also say, Jake, that for me, and this has always been true, my parents, both my father and my mother, my father, who's now passed away, he was an educator in Virginia, public school educator, ended his time as a superintendent of public schools in Rappahannock, Virginia, started as a guidance counselor at an all-black high school as for his first job when schools were segregated way back in the day. And my mother, who was a social worker. And both of them taught me from a very early age that, every human being deserves your respect and your dignity. And so as I, started to get settled at Roxbury Latin and teaching and working with colleagues and doing admission work and coaching and doing all these different things, that I always had their lessons and always had their advice that I could lean on outside of the institution as a help to me, which I was always grateful for. And then over time, obviously, people beyond Roxbury Latin at other schools. And as you mentioned, the Penn Fellows program for me, as I'm sure it was for you too, just having so many different mentors from all the different schools that are part of that program, able to share ideas, give advice, get advice, share war stories. It just, you learned a lot from people on a peer-to-peer level that has been so helpful to me.
Yeah, I agree with that. I would say, of all the things that I took from the Penn Fellowship program as a really early on, right out of college teacher, I had great mentorship here at Gilman through that program. But the most important thing that I think I got out of it was just meeting some of the advisors and the faculty members and the mentors from other schools and the fellows from other schools and learning from them through conversation, like, meeting you. And I've got Eric Cooper, who I might have on a podcast episode, and so many people that I just learned from conversation with and community really through that program.
Yep. Yeah. And what I would add to that, just to fast forward, rewind, why I was so excited to get involved in that when Carrie Brennan, who also was just continues to be an incredible mentor for me and supporter of me, when he brought to my attention that we had the opportunity to be a part of the Penn Fellows program, my initial reaction was, wow, this is something I wish I would have had when I was a young teacher. I was so grateful for the mentorship I received, but this is at a whole other level, where you have the in-school support, but you do have this other network of people, other fellows, other advisors, professors at Penn, that it was so exciting to me. So it was very personal, actually, getting involved in that program and wanting to give back in a way that people had given to me over time, and trying to share what knowledge, what wisdom had been passed along to me in my early time, but doing that in a larger way because of the structure of the Penn program.
I would love to know a little bit more about Kerry Brennan. I've met him once before, but maybe a little bit about his leadership style and why he's really been so successful at Roxbury Latin and really served as a mentor figure and friend and colleague for you as you're getting ready to become a head of school yourself.
Yeah, Kerry is, again, his background is he taught at Roxbury Latin a long time ago. He then decided that he would leave, and he headed the university school in Cleveland, Ohio, and was the lower school director, upper school director there, and then made his way to collegiate school in New York City to be the head before he ended up at Roxbury Latin. And so when he returned to Roxbury Latin, I'm sort of 7 years into my teaching career, and immediately, I think to his credit, both with me and with others, he realized that the future of the school rested in some of the younger colleagues who would outlast some of the people that he had started, working with many, many years before. They would retire right over his leadership time there. And so I think first and foremost with Kerry, he's someone who really invests in people and understands and tries to help them, figure out what it is that they want to do, but also pushes you to try to be maybe something that you don't even imagine you could be. And so there were very much moments for me with Kerry where he would say, what do you think about doing this? And I would say, I don't know so much about that. Not sure that would be the right thing for me. And he would say, well, here's what it will do for you. And in other words, he was a great convincer of why one should do this or do that in order to grow and to learn more and to continue to develop as an educator and as a leader. So, he has this, I think, terrific ability to understand people and understand what people need. Doesn't mean he understands everybody perfectly, but, he's really invested in that. And I think that says a lot about a leader. And it's a great lesson for me to carry on, right? To be very interested and curious about how people want to grow, how they want to learn, and then putting them in the right positions to do that very thing, right? Whether it's some professional development opportunity or it's just getting them involved in some part of the school that will allow them to develop that skill. And so I think, I really would say that's one of Kerry's greatest strengths, his sort of curiosity about individual people and how they may or may not want to grow. And then if he sees something you don't, really making some good recommendations to you about how you can do that. and going from there. And then beyond that, he is, as you said, he's been a very good friend to me. He's been incredibly supportive in good times and in bad, very even keeled in terms of, providing that very important support that you need from a leader, in times, both professionally and personally, when you need it. And so, he and I have a great friendship and keep in touch as I continue to get settled here and learn the ropes of being a head of school.
That's great. Yeah, Roxbury Latin, I've never been to the school itself, but some of my friends that went there that I know really well, Rob Shaw and Chris Rhoda, and some other guys that I have spent a lot of time with, are some of the most impressive kids that I know, and I feel like there's something in the formula at Roxbury Latin that produces these really impressive and smart and accomplished type of students. And from your perspective, what is really the formula at that school that I'm sure you're thinking about and carrying with you as you enter this new role at Derryfield? But what was it at Roxbury Latin that really produces such impressive young men?
Yeah, that is the $1 million question, I guess, about every institution. And I don't in any way think that Roxbury Latin has the corner on the market on that. I think similar ingredients exist here at Derryfield. I'm sure they do at Gilman as well. I think what was successful at Roxbury Latin, at least from my experience being there, was the emphasis put on relationships and how those relationships would allow someone to become the Chris Rhoda, the Rob Shaws, that you would meet, right? So I guess if I were to point to a structural piece about Roxbury Latin that's unique, one of the pieces that I always hold up is the advisory program there. Most advisory programs at schools, and I don't know what it's like at Gilman, but it is here. It's a group advisory, right? We meet once a week. We spend time together as a group. We met this morning actually, and it was great. We had a great time as a group. Roxbury Latin has a very different model. You meet with your advisories one-on-one, roughly once a week. So the relationship you form, and Chris Rhoda was an advisee of mine, as you know. Chris and I met once a week, every week for 6 years. And by the time, he graduated from Roxbury Latin and still after, he and I keep in touch quite a bit. That relationship allowed him to grow and mature and to become, the young man that he is, not just because of our relationship, but because of the relationships he then forms with other adults and other kids in really meaningful ways. And so I think it's sort of a magical element of recognizing that relationships are important, that you need to be intentional about them, and that they then build and multiply in order to help you to grow to become the person you want to be, right? The athlete you want to be, the student you want to be, the actor you want to, whatever it is that you want to be. And there's such a priority placed on that at Roxbury Latin, because what I just described to you is that's an investment, right? That one-on-one relationship once a week, that's an investment that you make as an institution. You're asking the adults in the school and the students to set aside a certain amount of time every week to build that relationship. Mm-hmm. And that's what makes that unique. That's why most schools, of course, have a group advisory program, because it's difficult to prioritize, that commitment. Yeah. So for me, that's a really critical part of how they do that.
Yeah, very similar here at Gilman. I've got 11 advisees, and actually yesterday just had parent conferences with all their parents. And I think that's one of the best things we do here at Gilman is the advisory program. We meet once a week usually, not always, because we have assemblies and other types of, student meetings during that time period. But I think I've just seen in my advisory the way that they've grown over this year. They're all involved in different areas and they've become closer and friends with each other, and I've become closer with them. So I think that really is a critical part of the whole community building aspect to a school that we're talking about.
Right. Yeah. And so one of the pieces that I'm interested in here is I also have really grown to appreciate the group advisory model. There's something to really take away from being together in community in that way, to have a smaller community. And I've really enjoyed that and feel like that was something that was missing from a Roxbury Latin advisory moment. And yet I also long for and really work in those individual meetings throughout the year, because they allow me really get to know kids a little bit differently than in that group setting. So in an ideal world, I think it's all of it, of course, right? It's sort of having those group meetings, having those individual meetings, but I think it's truly that, along with an emphasis placed on core values like character, and asking young people to be the best they can be on a consistent, regular basis, and setting expectations for them, right? And so that for me was certainly true at Roxbury Latin. I already see it in spades here at Derryfield, and I'm proud to be part of a community that believes in that and believes in how that can translate and transform a young person's life.
So something else that I want to ask you about is, it feels like in 2023, just getting over the COVID pandemic and we're back in school, it just seems like such a, important period of time. And we're almost, this period of time, we're living through history, like a wild moment in history almost. And we've got, we got the phones and technology and all of these different things at our fingertips. We were talking about ChatGPT the other day in the English department. You've got a lot of concerns with mental health right now amongst students. And just from your perspective, as we're kind of on the brink of the future, it feels like in a lot of ways, what really concerns you about, the direction we're heading or technology right now for young people at our schools?
Yeah, it's I feel like that's a question we've been asking for a while now, right, Jake? I mean, when I first teaching job at Roxbury Latin, we had computer camp. That was my first introduction to the school, and so I think about this a lot, because that reminds me that throughout time, I think we've been in this dilemma, not necessarily a problem that needs to be solved. People talk a lot about it's a dilemma. It's not going anywhere. It's here. We all use it, and so I try not to spend too much time being concerned as much as trying to think about how can we harness the power of this tool that we have, just like we might harness the power of a calculator or some other piece of technology in positive and good ways. And so, I'll take ChatGPT for a minute, and I'm not the first person to say this, but that's not only not going to go away, it's just going to get better and better, right?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And so I think the challenge we have as educators is to figure out how to use that tool responsibly and how to teach kids how to use that tool responsibly. What's the alternative? We turn our back to it and act like it doesn't exist, and the kids will use it anyway, right? So I think it's our job to try to be creative and work it into what we're doing and how we do things, while at the same time lamenting that we're losing something that you and I didn't have, and therefore we grew up differently and had a different experience. I just don't feel that it's super helpful to spend a lot of time lamenting the olden days and how things were, and more trying to figure out this is the students, this is their world, this is the world they're going to live in and continue to live in. So I think it's trying to find those eternal lessons that have always been true as we've seen revolution after revolution after revolution, and applying that to our mission as schools, right? Whatever your mission is, and really thinking about how we integrate that rather than just trying to keep it out. And I know that's hard, and it doesn't, it's not easy, but we're doing the same thing that you're doing. I think the first step is just to even understand what the tool is, what the power of it is. And then to also ask ourselves, are there ways in which we can do things more efficiently because of the tool, right, as an institution? And I think those are like exciting conversations to have, while we're also concerned about how we teach kids how to use these tools responsibly. So I'm less concerned and more excited, honestly, in thinking about how to integrate these tools for our students who are their 21st century citizens. I know we throw those words around a lot, but I mean, they are, and this is their world. It wasn't my world, but it's their world. And so it's our job, I think, right, to really work with them to build those relationships and teach those lessons about how to use those things responsibly.
Yeah, I think that's a really good answer, because, I've been thinking about the ChatGPT question, because I've enjoyed messing around with it and helping it generate ideas. And even as a teacher, you need a lesson plan and you want some ideas. Why not? It's right there at your fingertips. It's not like you can pretend that it doesn't exist. It's almost like pretending Google doesn't exist, and it will continue to develop and continue to get better. And I think you're exactly right. It's just thinking of ways to integrate it into our educational philosophies to make life better and easier, more efficient, and maybe save some time in a lot of ways.
Well, I think that's been the paradox, right? Because that's been it's almost like the false sales pitch that I feel like we've heard for a long time now. Oh, technology will actually make your life simpler, more efficient, easier. It hasn't, right? I
Right.
mean, at the end of the day, it has in some very specific ways, but for the most part, I think we'd all agree it's just made our life more complicated. It takes more of our time because we get, you know, dialed into other things that are part of it. So it is that it's that false assumption around it that I've struggled with for many years now. And yet, like you, here we are on Zoom doing a podcast together. I mean, here's the power of it, right? Having a conversation, continuing to build a relationship that you and I have, harnessing the good, the power of it, for everything that you hope, right, you could get out of a tool like this. So
Yeah, I think you could say the same thing about really, a lot of the things that are popular today. Social media, for example. I don't really like social media that much because it takes a lot of time and you've got to keep up with people, and the fear of missing out thing is real. Like, you look at everything else people are doing and all the impressive things everyone else is doing, and I don't think that's healthy all the time. But then again, like when I want to tell people that I did a podcast with Andy Chappell, no one's going to know about it unless I post something about it, right? So it's a double-edged sword, and it's just the way it is. And there are a lot of really good things about these tools, but a lot of negatives to them too.
that's true. And I think to that regard, just to kind of come back to your original question, I also don't think we can turn a blind eye to the challenges that come with it, right? And I think I have found that the best way to do that with both adults and kids, quite honestly, is to dial into some of the research and to make sure that we're not speaking anecdotally about things, but we're actually talking about hard facts
Mm-hmm.
and the impact that social media has on an adult or on a kid. Is it different? Is it the same? Is it generational? Is it not? And when I've been a part of those conversations and those presentations and those discussions, you see minds being changed. And I think that's where, we need to focus our attention, because there are some very real, serious challenges around the technology. And so we can't also turn a blind eye to it. We need to educate and help, back to the mental health question, help especially young people, but also people like us, right, to manage all of that and how it impacts us on in a health perspective.
Mm-hmm. So a question for you about these conversations and current events, really. When you're a school leader, is there a certain method of acquiring, I guess, a broad understanding of these issues that you look to on a daily basis, just to educate yourself about, ChatGPT and social media? Like, do you read the newspaper every day? Do you go to a certain website to read about things that are happening in the world? Like, what is your, I guess, daily habit of thinking about these different issues that you face and deal with as an educator?
That's a great question. So I actually approach this in a couple different ways. Number one, I do read especially since I'm new to this area, I read two local newspapers, the Manchester Union Leader and also Concord, New Hampshire is just up the road. So I read the Concord Daily Paper. And so I read those religiously every day for both local news, but there's also national news there. And the people will tell you in this area that they bring two different perspectives to their newspaper writing, which I find fascinating and interesting. So that's one area where I get, my sources from. I am a little old fashioned in that I really enjoy watching nightly news every night, sort of a holdover from my youth, and recognizing that that's imperfect and slanted and, whatnot, but it's helpful for me just to have a quick 20-minute snapshot of what's going on in the world. And then beyond that, I also use modern tools like Twitter and others that I find really helpful. I think if you can cut through some of the nonsense and really get, to various things that are being promoted through either Twitter or Instagram, I tend to learn a lot when I can just sit for, and I try to really limit my time. I don't sit there for hours. I don't have hours to do it, but I take 5, 10 minutes and just scan for things that are clearly going on and that are interesting. And then the third piece, which I really developed with the help of some friends, is to take some time on a regular basis. It typically is, once a month. I wish it were more, but there's only so much time in a day and a month to get together with people who want to just talk about interesting topics. And I have a colleague that I used to work with at Roxbury Latin. We touch base a pretty regular basis. And he always called those, this is another mentor moment. He shared this with me a few years ago, that he has these, what he calls stir the pot moments, where he takes an hour of time and he either gets together with other people, or he just with himself takes, sets aside an hour, reads something that he's wanted to read because it popped up somewhere, or someone's recommended it to him, or he just gets together with a few friends and says, what are you thinking about? What have you been reading? What are you what's on your mind? What seems interesting to you? And in those moments, I find those to just be so great, to be able to connect with other people, if that's the mode that I choose, or even just to say, hey, I'm just going to take an hour and I'm going to read something that I've not been able to read for the last, couple weeks. And then the final piece that I do feel is important is to read. I read every night for at least a half an hour. And again, that was advice from a French teacher at Roxbury Latin when I was maybe 24 years old. And he pulled me aside. We were coaching football, and he said, Andy, do you read every night? And I said, no, I don't read every night. I'm just trying to stay alive and grade papers and, come in the next. And he said, you have to read every night. And I said, okay. And he was so wise, and I respected him so much. I said, okay, I'll try it. And, I did it for a while, and then I fell out of it. But now I do it religiously. Every night I read, for a half an hour. I could have a million other things to do, but I just think it's really important to take yourself out of whatever you're doing. And I tend to try to read fiction just to get myself in a whole other world. But I also will read things that are compelling to me and that I want to read in that moment. So that's I guess 4 different ways that I try to stay up on all kinds of different topics, and also to keep myself healthy and fresh and, new ideas in my mind.
I like that a lot. I like the 30-minute reading per night. My sister is in 7th grade right now, and my parents, they've got their hands full with 2 dogs and Jenny back home. But my dad's biggest thing is, Jenny, it's reading time. You've got to do an hour. I think it's an hour for her, which is good, which is impressive. I don't know if I believe that, but an hour of reading every night, and they sit there and they do it. And I think it's just such a good habit, because in a way it is, regardless of what you're reading, it's a form of meditation too, and just stepping back and recollecting and dipping your mind into a new environment for a little bit of time. I like that.
Couldn't agree more. And I he's not with us anymore, but Ken Kahn, who was a legendary French teacher at Roxbury Latin, that was his advice to me, which I've stuck with, to this day.
So this might be a good time of asking you about your book recommendation, or anything that you've really read recently or just in your life that made a big impact on you that maybe you still think about right now.
It's such a good question, and I could give so many different answers. And if it's okay, I'll actually give a couple.
That's
the
great.
One that always comes back to me in terms of just from a professional level that had a profound impact on me was a book called Legacy by James Kerr. And for those who don't know, he tells the story of the All Blacks rugby team in New Zealand, and sort of what the culture of that particular organization, not just the team, but the organization looks like. And there I think are just eternal lessons in that book about leadership and about culture and just good storytelling that happened there. I also, from a fiction point of view, I'm a sucker for things like The Nightingale by Kristin Hannah, which I thought was just a wonderful historical fictional account of, that time, to also, Where the Crawdads Sing, which I thought was a fantastic reminder to me of my Southern roots and sort of the interesting idea of getting into a little girl's mind, right, who's living in the wilderness and trying to figure out what life looks like and what's important to her. So, and then the final one that I would share that, again, to bring it back to the kind of the more professional piece, but also the personal piece, is the power of moments. And it really talks about, in that text written by two brothers, has to do with, both as educators, but also just as people, how there are these moments in our lives, and it's obvious to us, right, that have such a profound impact on us, create a sense of awe that, I think both personally and professionally are really important to be intentional about those moments, to not let them slip by, to not forget them, and to let people know when you're in those moments. And I think about a lot of the lessons in that text from an educational point of view, in thinking about classroom settings and trying to create moments, right? There's a lot of practice that happens, so to speak, to use an athletic, metaphor there, but there's a lot of practice that happens in classrooms, but really thinking about the moments, right? The performative moments and the impact that they have on a student's mastery of knowledge, but also their memory of that course and what they're getting out of that course, and the material that they're learning. So that text I would just throw in there at the very end has really changed my thinking about what teaching looks like, and also what building school culture and community looks like.
I like that a lot. And I was thinking about something similar. I haven't read The Power of Moments, but I had my students the other day write to me about just how the second semester is going so far. And one moment in class that is either their proudest moment or most memorable moment so far. And it's just so interesting to me to see all of the different things that they thought were important or significant to them that I wouldn't have known. It's like one student was thinking about when she had to read her personal essay, at the beginning of the semester. One person was thinking about one quotation that he keeps thinking about in the book that we're reading. And I think that's so cool because all of the students have different moments that stand out to them that they're going to remember. And I might not even see that, as the teacher. It's just,
Right.
It's important to them.
Yeah, I that's such a great observation, Jake, because I'm consistently blown away when a former student shares a story with me at a reunion, or I just see them somewhere, and I think to myself, I don't even remember that happened, but for them it was just this pivotal moment for them that they'll never forget, and really solidified something for them, and that's what made it memorable, right? And so that power again of that moment, and it is an interesting idea as an educator. Those, as you just noted, they happen all the time, and I think that's, so I think it's one of the beautiful things about being an educator. You can get frustrated by feeling like you're missing all those moments, or you can feel good about the fact that kids are having moments with you and with other kids that will be memorable for a lifetime, and that you're making that impact on them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And you had that same feeling growing up as I did. So.
Right. Yeah. And I think about, my teachers in high school, and I couldn't tell you the books really. I could probably tell you a few of the books that we read or some of the units that we did, but I don't really remember them that much. But I remember when Miss Shepard, my 11th grade English teacher, asked me, "Hey, you seem like you're interested in the New Yorker. I've got a bunch of old copies of the New Yorker, and you can have them." And I remember such a weird moment, and she has no idea that I remember that. Or my 5th grade English teacher who said, "Hey, you're pretty good at writing," and that could have totally shifted my trajectory, just her saying that one day after class. And she has no idea that she said that, and I remember it every day almost. So it's kind of cool.
Yeah. No, yeah, I think we all have, you could tell me many more and I could tell you many more, just moments of, again, I think of them almost, there's been research done on the sense of awe, right? You're you're looking at the Grand Canyon and there's a sense of awe. I think it also, awe can happen in very small moments like you're describing, and I'm thinking about, and they're so formative, right? They really help young people as well as adults kind of continue to move through their life. They give us confidence. They also can be damaging too. I guess that's the other thing we should talk about. But those, you can also have moments that really don't help a young person or an adult, grow. And so I think being mindful of those moments and making sure that I again spend a lot of time just thinking about how can we make them more intentional, while also recognizing that there will be many other moments that I don't even know are happening, but
Hmm.
they're happening for somebody else, and that's okay. And we'll learn from that and move on.
Yeah, really interesting. Part of education is those moments. So I like that book recommendation. I'll have to check it out. Thank you, and the other ones as well. And then the other thing, Andy, I just wanted to tell you that I'm headed down to Virginia, University of Virginia, in a couple weeks to see Harvard play Virginia in lacrosse. I think it's Virginia's maybe third game of the season or fourth game and Harvard's first game. So hopefully it's not too much of a bloodbath. But I'm excited to spend some time in Charlottesville and walk around campus a little bit.
Well, yeah, I think you'll enjoy it. Head down to the corner and check out the shops and obviously the lawn. You'll enjoy that, Jake, a lot, I'm sure. And I wish your Harvard team well, but we'll see how that turns out. I don't know how UVA is looking this year. As you know, I'm a baseball guy for the most part, but I do follow Virginia Lax as well. So have fun with that.
Yeah, excited to spend some time in that town. It's a great town, and so it'll be fun. But Andy, it's great to reconnect with you. I'm really happy that you're doing well and you're in a great spot at Derryfield. And I look forward to keeping in touch, as the years go on. And it's just great to see you again. So thank you very much for spending some time today on the podcast.
Well, thank you, Jake. And I'm so proud of you. I hope you know that. It's so great to know that you're in your fifth year there and doing well and doing this podcast. I think it's so important and excellent that you're able to carry on this tradition of relationships and conversations that I know you and I have had, and I know you've had with other people that you've had on your podcast. So keep up the great work and look forward to staying connected.
Awesome. Thank you, Andy. Talk to you soon.
Bye-bye.